probably have heard of the Shabbat Shul shooting yesterday in Poway, California. One of the attendants, Laurie Gilbert Kay, was killed. She succumbed to her injuries in hospital, I believe. Rabbi Yisrael Goldstein had both his hands wounded, and he requires surgery on both. Further, two people were also shot and wounded. The 8-year-old Noya Dahan and her uncle Almak Peretz, 34-year-old. Dahan was hit in the leg as he tried to rescue some children when the firing started. The family moved from near Gaza to California to actually avoid terror attacks. This brings me to the question how right-wing terror differs from Muslim terror, or what is better or worse, or how we can differentiate from that. I mean, it is easy to point fingers on the Muslim community if you're an outsider, and then there's also the other easy way to just claim when it's broken, then it's yours. That is a tactic that you see very often on the political left, and I've mentioned it in my previous video. Lenin, Stalin, Pol Pot, Mao, they are all not real socialists, and so on and so on. But this shooter very obviously wanted less immigration, or had some issue with Islam, because he attacked a mosque a bit earlier, not as violently, but he was vandalizing a mosque. So it is likely that he is also anti-immigration, and that of all public policies that he would support, conservative ones would take prominence. So we cannot just issue the responsibility for this. And one big thing that red-pilled me was my realization that the Muslim community does not enough to stop violent attacks from happening. And what I want to discuss is whether we, as conservatives, as those who are against immigration, or migration in general, actually, if we do enough to prevent this, or if we, or at least do a little bit better than the Muslim community, or if we are just as bad as they are when it comes to this. The question also entails what can actually be done. I start with an anecdote, because recently I was on Gap. It is quite a surprise that this attack was not yet exploited like the Pittsburgh one, to shut down all speech. Now, I had been on Gap recently, and I saw that there are still neo-Nazi memes floating around, and one was a collection of pictures. That's quite funny. I just explained it was a neo-Nazi meme, but it was actually funny, and it had 4 windows, and as on the first corner some pictures of Werner von Braun and some Nazis, and on the right side, sorry, from your perspective, that is the side, and on the right side there was a shuttle start, a rocket flying up into the sky, and it said, "Import Nazis, get NASA." Below that there were also 2 squares, and the left one said, from your side, that's here, the left one said, "Import Jews," and showed Hasidic Jews, like the victims of yesterday's attack, Hasidic Jews, and it says, "Import Jews and you get," and the remaining corner was a collage of pictures, and what you get is feminism, communism, and so on. About the last things that you would expect to come out of Hasidic Jews, but it tells you about how weird this entire Nazi realm of ideas actually is, and how much sorting out it actually needs. I must say I did not engage with this person, but I did actually encounter people in real life, offline, that I spent time with, talking them out of Holocaust denial, talking them out of their hate of Israel. And when you have some time on your hands to do that, it does actually work. I was lucky that they were smart people, and they were Arabs. I don't know really if neo-Nazis are more difficult to talk out of such a thing than Arabs. I have no experience with that, but I believe the general approach should always be the same. It is to talk to people and not do what left asks you to do, namely to isolate them. I do not believe that the situation changed, that they suddenly realize, hey, wait, a Hasidic Jew is responsible for feminism, and feminism is therefore responsible that I do not have children, or whatever the issue is. As it turns out, with this attacker, that might have been his motivation, that either he does not have enough children, or he believes that his kind, or people who look like him, do not have enough children. The attacker has left a memo, and according to news sources, it is indeed about him fearing his race dying out. I have not read the memo, but I'm not doing this on principle. I'm just not wasting my time on this. But it shows to me that this guy did not see his ideas or his worries represented in the general discourse. I must say that I personally do not share these concerns of his. I would not bother if Jews or whites or any other race would not continue over next hundreds of years. Biologically, I'm perfectly fine with people mingling and in all of this. I also believe that one doesn't have to worry, because there's always a set of people. We say differences attract each other, but it's also true that similar people attract each other, and it's really the type of your biological procreation strategy, something that you're born with, that you cannot really decide, even though we have some cultural enforcement to go for a similar first selection. But I personally do not feel that it is important to continue one race by self-selection. There will always be enough people who, by their biological build-up, will find people who are just as similar to carry on their, their ethnic identity. I have absolutely no fears about this. I do not share his issues, but I understand that we as human beings have different procreation strategies, and it is for me okay that others have different things. I also believe that actually the sexual proclivities people have are related to these strategies, and we find each other's proclivity usually disgusting. Some people find it attractive, for whatever reason, to look at imagery of castrations. I have absolutely no idea why one would find it stimulating to see parts of another man and then also them being mutilated. But if you think about it logically from an evolutionary standpoint, it does actually make sense to gratify castrations, because if you kill off your competition in one way or another, even if you make it just look like an accident, whatever, it just improves your access to girls. So from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes perfect sense that you find castration attractive. But for me, that would not make sense. And likewise, I have no understanding for people who want their own lookalikes to procreate more than other people. But I can sympathize with the fact that they want to talk about these things openly, just as I want to talk about things that move me. So from a civic perspective, I have access to this, and I can kind of think about the diffusion of this tension. People are built as they are, and we have to think about what we can actually do about this. And it does not help to isolate incels and MGTOWs in the hope that they will not explode. The irony is that particularly the Hasidic Jews who have now been the victims of this attack also fear very strongly that they lose their identity, that the community may go away, that Jews are no longer Jewish, and they put a lot of effort into distinguishing themselves from others. So they have that very basic fear, but it's not driven biologically. It is, or maybe some people who had this biological drive emphasized it culturally. So they actually would be able to help the murderer with his ambition if he had been smart and maybe had reached out to them instead of gunning them down, because it is maybe reasonable to ask if your community can sustain itself. And those people who have become the victim would have been actually good partners, and that's a tragic irony in the end. What does not help is that we see the media constantly mocking people who fear to lose their land. We have all these people cheering as they predict the dates, the years from which on entire countries are no longer majority Christian, or no longer majority white, or no longer majority whatever. And I don't understand why that cheering becomes ever louder. I would understand, I mean, from my point of view, I would not care. I would not care if a country is no longer Jewish or no longer. I mean, we just have this one, and it's the harbor that saves us from persecution. But I mean, if we had many, I wouldn't terribly care if one falls from this majority to that majority. But if I do not care, I would also not cheer one way or the other. What I do not understand is that we have this aggression against people who are basically just following their most natural instincts. Of course, people want to keep their lands, and if you say, ha ha ha, you're losing your land, ha ha ha, your people are no longer holding the majority in 2050 or whatever, you're just pouring oil into the fire. And this is where I have my problems finding a good faith argument for these people who are triggering this incels and MGTOW loners. What gratification do they get out of the reality that the white population is shrinking in once mostly white countries? What is it that makes them mock these individuals and these people? Now I come back to my great basic question: what are we doing differently from the Muslim community? I do not see the Muslim community talking to their aunts, uncles, brothers, and so on, out of bad ideas. That is something that we do not see very often, and that is what I have a very big problem with. But when it comes to MGTOWs, insults, and so on, there are a number of people who are talking about that issue. There's a new YouTuber, Dr. Edward Dutton, a British guy who is into evolutionary biology. He terribly needs a hair wash, so I'm sorry to refer to him. Leave on the comment section, always do your hair, clean your wash yourself until he gets it done, because it's disgusting to watch. But outside of that, maybe just listen to it and don't look at his face. But outside of that, he is talking about the specifics of relationships, sexuality, feminism, and so on, from the perspective of biology. And there is a huge market, as it seems. His channel is rising like a bat out of hell. And of course, there's also got started Jewish Canadian who is also in that field, has his hair washed, and he's quite popular, and so there is some outreach. There is some people who are trying to give a voice to these loners, and who try to find a solution. And another difference between the Muslim community and the conservatives is that I do not expect Muslims to be successful every time they do something about their problems. And also I give credit to many Muslims, like Hamid Abdel Samad, Nitra Kelek, Seyran Atish, Ayan Hisyali. You know the names. There are many Muslims who actually do a great job trying to educate the community and try to get the problem solved. But they are not enough, and I do not see enough ambition in that Muslim community. Compared to that, and compared to the overall problem, conservatives are doing much better. Right-wing crime is quite a small problem compared to Muslim violence. There is one talking point that I hear in German again and again, that is the responsibility ethics were superior to the intention mindset. This goes back to sociologist Max Weber, who is entirely overrated. And the idea really is that all that matters is the result. But as I said, I do not fault Muslims for not succeeding in stopping every single attack. The only thing a man or a woman can do at a time is to give his best. And without that, if we were just oriented on the predictable responsibilities, something that we can achieve within our lifetime, within our efforts, and that is calculable, that is not very risky, but we would know the results. If we would tackle every problem with that mindset, we would not have a wheel, we would not win a single war, we would not achieve anything at all, because it's impossible to change something for the better if you just take these very small steps, and you do not or you just see the entire problem as a whole and do not know where to start. Sometimes you have to just simply start at some point, and it just eventually you can find a strategy how to improve things step by step, but you have to start out from one angle at a time. So my conclusion is that effort does matter. That was my last point, and that we should not do what left suggests us to do. We should not isolate people further. It is more likely to spark the powder keg and makes for tragedy. What we must do is to continue reaching out to such individuals, and I believe conservatives are doing better at this point than Muslims and leftists alike. That was it for today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.